So this is where the Broncos find themselves. They got a taste of what the playoffs look like, right? See, they went from ramen noodles to filet mignon, right? They got a taste. So here's what the chef did. He going into Buffalo, they cut him a section of the filet mignon and say, taste that. You taste that tender meat, that's what success tastes like. But if you want more of it, what are you willing to put in?
Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Broncos and Bourbon. I am your host, Phil Milani. Very excited for today's episode as Nick Ferguson joins the program. We started the season, very first episode of this podcast with Nick Ferguson, and now we're here to recap the 2024 season with Nick, and we get into a lot of good stuff here. We talk about how successful this season was for the Broncos, going 10-7, really exceeding everybody's expectations for this team, finding Bo Nix, a franchise quarterback here. Heard Sean Payton say it this week, we found our leader. We get into Bo Nix talk here. We talk about what's next for this Broncos team. What are like the three big needs that the Broncos need this offseason? What's the grocery list here for how the Broncos can take that next step? And, we get into this Bills game a little bit too. And like, if there were any questions that popped up there, like, hey, all this success this season, but how close really are the Broncos to being able to compete with those top-notch teams? Did that Bills loss 31-7, did that let any doubt creep into the direction that the Broncos are taking? We get into all of that with Nick, and I think that you'll really enjoy this conversation as we really break down the season, what's next for the Broncos, and where they're heading here after such a successful year and the trajectory pointing in the right direction. So with that, let me get to my conversation with Nick Ferguson. Nick, thank you for taking some time to join the program. It's only fitting that at the beginning of the year we chatted, and now at the end of the year we're recapping the season.
Yeah, a great way to kind of bookend the season, if you will.
Yeah, and what a season it was for the Broncos. I don't think many people out there expected them to go 10-7 this year. I think that they sort of summed things up in the big press conference to wrap up the year pretty well, that they made some progress, but not quite happy where they were with the end of the season. Nick, how would you sum up that game against the Bills, 31-7 loss?
Well, it was a little disappointing, Phil, and the reason I say that it's disappointing from my standpoint is I was very optimistic about the team's ability going into Buffalo, and I knew that they had a big challenge ahead of them trying to stop Josh Allen and James Cook. But once again, I was just optimistic based on what I was seeing all season long from the defense, and then you see the maturation process of Bo Nix. I was hoping that somehow that Bo Nix was kind of unleashed like Josh Allen, allowing him to just go out there, play loose, play free, because all week long, all we continue to hear, from so many people, both locally and nationally, well, the Broncos are playing with house money. What does that really mean? That means that all the pressure wasn't on them. So they can go in and play relaxed because no one expected them to actually be there. But once you get to the game, you have to show up, because leading up until Sunday, we heard young and hungry. What does that mean? That means you have a team with the average age of 26, and you got a bunch of guys that are hungry. And with that in the back of my mind, I was like, Broncos got a chance. It's going to come down to Will Lutz field goal. The reason I said that, back in 2007, when I played against I played for the Denver Broncos. We played in Buffalo. Jason Elam kicked a game-winning field goal, right? Several years before that, when the Broncos had to endure a lot of snow, getting out of Denver, getting into Buffalo, guess what happens? Jason Elam kicks a game-winning field goal. So I'm charged going into the game. I see that first opening drive, that big shot down the field to Troy Franklin, and I'm like, yes, the Broncos have arrived. Let's slap Josh Allen across the face, and then all of a sudden, it just fell apart. And I was just like, what happened?
Yeah, what do you think happened? I mean, you don't think that they were able to play free after that first drive? Like, did you see them start to tighten up at all, or what went wrong there?
Well, see, I'm glad you brought that up. That's the one thing about being young and hungry. There's two things working here, Phil, that you don't know because you're young and you're just hitting that experience for the first time. But that young and hungry lack of experience also has a flip side of that coin because once the game starts to get tight, and it became tight because Buffalo 31 unanswered points. My thing was I wanted to see how the team responded when things started to get tight from their standpoint, and there was a lack of execution. And what I mean by that, you had guys on both offensive side and the defensive side not executing as though it was detailed to them in practice. So usually what happens is like coaches get blamed when things don't go well. Like the time of possession was a big issue heading into the game. Can you keep the ball away from Josh Allen, and can you get him off the field, right? That was a problem. So we saw a lot of people, I did on social media, but blaming, Vance Joseph in the defense, they couldn't get off the field. I said, Vance was putting them in position. They were not executing and making the plays. And then also offensively, it's a team game. You have to move the ball down the field methodically, and you have to convert on third downs, right? So you have to find a way to chew up the clock. The offense did not do that to help the defense. And then the defense, when they needed to get off the field, they were not able to get off the field. And once again, man, you got to tip your cap to, Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills. He had an excellent game plan. It was slow. It was methodical. It reminded me of what Zach Taylor did against the Broncos when he was like, okay, normally everyone knows us for taking shots down the field. But you know what? We're not going to do that. We're going to find Mike Gesicki, give it to him. We're going to utilize Chase Brown as a running back and a pass-catching running back. Then we're going to find T. Higgins. We're going to find Jamar Chase. We're just going to dink and dunk and take what the defense is going to give them. But once again, if you can't, from an offensive standpoint, sustain drives, keep your defense on the sideline and keep them fresh, then you're going to have outcomes like this.
Yeah, it definitely felt like that to me. Like, especially when they missed that field goal at halftime, like that was a little bit demoralizing going into the locker room there. And it just felt like they just never bounced back. And I thought it was on the offense a little bit too, Nick, because like it stopped going back and forth. It just became a one-sided sort of game. And you can't upset a team like the Bills like that on the road. If you're not able to, at least punch back a little bit there in the second half. So definitely a disappointing loss. And, I think that Sean even said, like, hey, he thought that they were going to play better than they did. And, so many fans were like, hey, they weren't even supposed to be here, blah, blah, blah. It's still a great season. I'm like, okay, that's for later in the week. Immediately after the game, it's okay to be upset. You lost 31-7. You wanted to see more fight from this Broncos team, even though it still was a great season.
Yeah, you know what? Okay, so you got two things working here. The Broncos were not perceived to be here by so many people. I think Vegas had them at the beginning of the season, just kind of winning 5 games. I put them at 8 with the possibility of winning 9. So obviously they surpassed, those early numbers. And for me, look, I know the Broncos are ahead of schedule as far as getting to that point. So that should definitely be noted. That should be celebrated at the same time. But for me, being in with this organization when the standard was set, the whole idea is we just can't be happy to be here. And that was something that for other teams, that was kind of their motto. For teams in the NFC, that was their motto. We're just happy to be here. I mean, why do all that work to get to the show and not show up?
Yeah.
That's the thing. And that's going to stick in the craw of the coaches and the players as they move forward and they watch the playoff, because it becomes a hard pill to swallow, Phil, because I remember losing to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the AFC Championship. And I have to tell you, man, this time of year is the worst year for me. It's the worst because I relive all those things over where you go, if I coulda, woulda, shoulda. We
Mm,
don't get do-overs. We don't.
yep.
So hopefully this lights a fire under this team and they understand. I mean, that brass ring was right there in front of you. There's no guarantees in 2025. Now, you learn from this, but understand in that moment, no matter young and hungry, lack of experience, you got to stand up. Someone on the sideline has to say something. Say, look, we didn't do all this stuff just to get here, just to falter. Even if we were to lose against a team that had I think the roster was somewhat better than the Broncos, especially the way they play collectively. We have to galvanize ourselves. Even if we lose, we have to go out there and gain some type of respect. And I think that's when you look at some of the players, how they responded after the game, you can tell that they were disappointed when they were asked the question, do you feel as though this is a successful season? Some of those guys said no because they lost, and I understand that they're emotional and how they lost. You got to bring that fight every single day and every single possession to your opponent.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think it was still a successful season, but I think the way that they lost that game raises some questions, Nick. And it's sort of a weird thing because there's just this assumption out there that the Broncos are going to be back in that same spot next year, like you said, but there are no guarantees. The Broncos had a great season this year to put themselves in that spot, and there's no guarantees that you're going to be back in this spot. But for some reason, there is this feeling out there that this team is only on the rise. But when you look at it, Nick, I'm interested to see what you think because this team struggled against teams that had winning records this year. Really only beat that Bucks team way back in week 3. You look at the rest of certainly the AFC. There's some really talented quarterbacks out there that you assume that Bo's going to take this step, but it's still going to be challenging to face some of these other quarterbacks around the conference there. Nick, it was just sort of, I guess they're heading in the right direction, but how close do you think that this team is right now?
I think that they are close from a competing standpoint. Now, if we're talking about, and this is what we have to define, are we talking a playoff appearance or are we talking about truly competing for a Super Bowl? That's two different things. That's two different things. And the reason they are, Phil, because this is not the NFC. Once again, keep that in mind. This is the AFC. If you go down from top to bottom, the north, the south, right? You would the East. You would see there are a lot of top quarterbacks in the AFC. So it's a murderous row of quarterbacks. So as this team starts to look forward towards free agency and the draft, they got to look not just within the AFC West. They got to look in the AFC as a whole and say, well, what are those teams doing better? What do we need to be better in certain positions? Not only to compete, but to possibly win a Super Bowl title. Now, 2025, I think they're going to make some adjustments. 2026, things would be much better because now they have more money. Bo will be in his 3rd year. Now it gives an opportunity for things to really pop because usually young players, or more about your young players in the 3rd year. And Bo, I'll say this, was a pleasant surprise for a lot of people. I knew the kid was really talented, but once again, he has a lot of skills that we haven't seen displayed just yet. So if the Broncos go out and get the right rookie pieces to play for a while with Bo, things will definitely change. But the idea, okay, they're right on the cusp. They're on the cusp of what? Another playoff berth? I'll say yes. A Super Bowl berth, not just yet. But they have the potential to get there.
Yes, I agree with you there, Nick. It's they're going to be competitive. I mean, Bo puts you in that position where you can win any game, it feels like. But I just look around the rest of the conference and, you're just like, gosh, it is tough every single year to make the playoffs in this league. You look at the Patriots hiring Vrabel there. Drake May showed some promise at the end of the year there. The Dolphins are a talented team that did not make the playoffs this year because, Tua has some injury issues. But like Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, they didn't make the playoffs this year. You figure that they're gonna, at least be improved next year. You just go. I mean, obviously the Bengals did not make the playoffs with Joe Burrow. So like, just even being in this spot, it takes a lot to get to this spot, and it was just a little bit disappointing that the Broncos didn't make more of this opportunity. But I did want to talk to you about Bo here a little bit. What do you think is the biggest reason to be excited about Bo Nix?
Well, for me, he matches today's quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, some individuals long for those days where you had that statuesque quarterback, and they want him to go through all this progression of reads and do all these things and just stay in the pocket. Even when things break down, stay in the pocket. Those quarterbacks did that because they had no mobility, right? The game has definitely changed. Look at, the Broncos played against Josh Allen this year. They played against Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. All of those guys are talented quarterbacks in their own right, and they move around. And the fact that Bo can move around, he can manipulate the pocket. And if the defense breaks down, it gives him an opportunity, he can take off and run. To me, that's today's game. It looks different. Some old school throwback coaches, they don't like that because they're not used to that. They didn't come up with that. But that's where the game is. The game is about growing and developing. And it's just like anything in life, either you adapt or you die. And watching Bo possess those skills, I mean, I'm really excited. The only thing for him is that he didn't have a prominent run game to support him, and he didn't have a viable tight end that he can throw to that was somewhat of a safety net, and then also shots down the field. We saw Marvin Mims come on late, and I was like, yes, this is what I was talking about. This is what I thought Marvin Mims was going to be this season after what we saw Marvin Mims do with Russell last season, and that would have helped Bo. But Bo has a lot of skills, and he's adapted well to Sean Payton's play calls because if you know Sean's system, it's really, really long. It's really, really wordy, and he did a great job just kind of trying to master that.
Yeah, a really huge playbook, and just coming from the college game to the pro game, getting adjusted to that. There's so much that goes into being a rookie quarterback in this league, and I mean, I think that there's a lot to be excited about with Bo as he heads into this offseason, though. Nick, what does he need to work on? Because you see some of these quarterbacks in their second year, they're either making a huge jump like a Peyton Manning, or there's a sophomore slump. What do you think that Bo needs to work on in order to be able to take that jump next year?
Hey, footwork. I'll always start there because most people say, well, he needs to throw the ball a lot. Well, he's been a quarterback for how many years? If you don't know how to throw the ball now, then you got problems. So for me, it is his footwork because his footwork is going to guide him on every single thing that he does. Case in point, if he's going through his progressions, the idea is that he hits that back foot and then he looks left, right, and he's going through progression 1, 2, and 3, and then he's got to reset his feet, right? And we've seen, reels of Dak Prescott and even Peyton Manning doing these type of footwork drills, especially with their hips. The reason they're doing them because their feet pretty much guides them to the throw, right? Because that's their base. That's where you build everything. So he needs to just kind of work on his footwork and then go back and watch the film, right? Do some self-scouting this offseason. Look at some throws that he didn't make or he should have made, and just to see, okay, well, here's what I did in my first year in the system that I could have done better. Did I lead the wide receiver or did I throw the ball on his back hip? But more importantly, look at other successful quarterbacks around the league. See what it is that they were doing when they made a jump from year 1 to year 2. And you mentioned the sophomore slump, right? Which is kind of a real thing because we saw C.J. Stroud kind of going through that, right? But a lot of that has to do not just with the player himself. A lot of that has to do with the supporting cast around him and the play calling. Because once again, self-scouting is very vital. It's very important. You see what you did well. You see what you didn't do well, but it also gives you an opportunity to kind of readjust and reevaluate your scheme as you move forward.
Yeah, it's like okay, he's gonna gain more experience. He's gonna get more comfortable with Sean. Maybe that'll open up some more things there. But you tell me, Nick, from a defensive perspective, a guy who has now a full year of tape out there, is it going to be easier to game plan against Bo next year for some of these opposing defenses? Just because now defenses are a little more familiar with what Sean and Bo are going to try to do.
Yes and no. Yes, because now you have film, right? What are you studying? Here's what you know. He's a mobile quarterback. The pocket breaks down. He knows where to escape. And for me, every quarterback needs an escape hatch. Where am I escaping? Left, right, between the A gaps or the B gap or the C gap, right? So they'll be able to watch both from that standpoint and say, well, these are the things he likes to do, and this is where he likes to go on perimeter runs. But once again, that goes back to Sean Payton and the offensive game plan. How much of it will you change? Because here's what happens: if you coach and you play long enough in the league, everyone's gonna have a book on you. All right, we call it book when we speak, but basically it's film. Can you break your tendencies? Can you break your habits? That is what everyone's going to watch. And if they're not upgrades or things changing your scheme as it portrays to your, or excuse me, pertains to your tight ends and how you utilize your wide receivers and your scheme itself, to me, that's the tendency they're looking at, right? The offensive tendency, you know what Bo can do, but now you're checking the boxes from the offensive tendencies. And I can tell you from me just watching film myself, the Broncos have some tendencies that they need to break. Those tendencies showed up in the game against Cincinnati, against Kansas City, and Sunday against the Buffalo Bills. So they got to break those tendencies to help Bo out.
What do you think those are, Nick? Like, if you could share, just like, what do you see on tape? Like, what are some of the things that they need to sort of mix up?
Well, once again, they run a lot of reduced formations. And what I mean by that is that we have the numbers. Just look at the field from a number standpoint. When you bring your receivers inside those numbers, the idea is you bring the defense in as well. And that allows the defense, just like from the Cincinnati game, they're nickelback. Every time the Broncos will reduce the formation, it gave him an opportunity to kind of blitz right off the edge. And for me, I didn't see a lot of side adjustments. Side adjustments is when the quarterback looks and he sees what he thinks may be a blitz or someone's coming off the edge, where he can signal to the wide receiver and they change up their routes to take advantage of what the defense is showing. The idea is there's nothing wrong with running those reduced condensed formations, but those can't be main staples. You got to spread them out, because when you bring everyone in, you bring everyone in the box. So when you're trying to run the ball, it makes it really difficult. And if you're going to do it, Phil, you got to run what we call pin and pull. I mean, you got to use your wide receivers to kind of pin in linebackers and DBs and pull your guards. Get Quinn Miners, right? Get him outside. Get that big belly outside so he can run and steamroll corners and safeties. That's what I would like to see, and that would give the running backs an opportunity to use their speed, to use their power more than just running into the teeth of the defense.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to ask you about this running game, Nick. Like, how much of it is okay? They didn't have maybe some of the personnel to be able to execute what they wanted to do, or how much of it is, like you were talking about there, a little bit of the scheme, and also the fact that, hey, Bo likes to be in shotgun here, not very familiar with being under center, and that sort of dictating how much they can run the ball, just because it's very predictable in terms of the direction the run game's going to go when you're back there in shotgun.
Yeah, that's something that you have to change. But go back to college football for a second. We see so many collegiate quarterbacks in the shotgun. This is why their progression in the NFL is so slow, because once they get to the league, now they have to work from under center. That's a whole different set of footwork, right? Because how are you pulling away from the ball, handing off the ball? If you're going to run play action, setting up your footwork, and then when you do hand the ball off, you have to make it look the same. I mean, Peyton Manning was meticulous at doing this. Everything he did with his footwork, whether he was handing the ball off or whether it was a play fake, he made it all look the same. And this is probably issue with Bo and a lot of these young quarterbacks. So that is something that the Broncos have to change, because I can tell you this, where if I'm playing defense and I see a quarterback set up in a shotgun or a pistol, automatically I'm thinking 60% of the time that's kind of like a pass, right? It's a pass because the idea, he's already in his 5-7 step drop sitting in the shotgun, right? So mentally I will play it that particular way. But when the quarterback is under center, you don't know. You have no idea. It could be a play pass or he can hand it off. These are things that the Broncos need to change about their schemes that sometimes tip their hand. The other thing that would tip their hand when they started using Marvin Mims in the backfield, right? Mm. We call that zoo. And don't ask me why they call it that way, but that's what we call it, zoo. That's an alert for someone in the backfield who's normally doesn't line up there and they're not a running back. Automatically, my eyes go to that player. So I'll give you a play, for instance. There's a play, it's about 9 minutes, 48 seconds in the second quarter, so you can go look this up. Marvin Mims is offset to Bo Nix's left side and Javante's to the right. The Broncos immediately put him in motion from left to right before the ball is even snapped. On the snap of the ball, Bo turns directly and throws that pass. Now, the reason I bring that up, there was a similar route run against Kansas City that was successful, and Marvin Mims actually scored. So you had to figure that the Bills watched that, and they were in man coverage. The guy who was covering Marvin Mims, soon as Mims went in motion, his defender just flew to the ball, ran past Cortland and LaJordan Humphrey, and made the tackle for a loss. For me, that's where you kind of have an evolution with that particular play. What I mean by that, have Marvin Mims do that same motion. Why? You already have it on tape. So what you do if you Bo, you fake that, Cortland fakes like he's going to block, and he goes vertical, right? Or you throw it to Marvin Mims and allow him to either throw it back down the field or throw it back to Bo, right? Once again, we're talking about taking something that you have done, that you have put on film for the past couple of weeks, and now you throw a wrinkle off of it. So now you make the defense think, well, is it this or is it something else? That's the evolution, man. It's got to change.
Yeah, make the defense pay for being a little too aggressive. Like, hey,
there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, make them pay a little there. One more thing on Bo, and then I want to talk to you about some of the needs the Broncos need to address this offseason. But I know that you are a big fan of him pulling the ball down and running and using his legs and moving the chains there. Does the fact that he sort of revealed that he had these back fractures, does that give you a little bit of a pause and just say, hey, this is our franchise quarterback. We need to protect this guy a little bit more. Because, one thing I thought was interesting was everybody was like, dang, look how tough Bo is. He played these games with his back fractures. Our good friend Nate Jackson, he was like, no, man, like they shouldn't have played him. They should have played the, Stidham or something there for some of these games and let Bo get healed up. What's your take on that? Like, how much do you need to be worried about something like that happening? Or, hey, you got to just go and line up and play football?
I'm sorry, Phil. This is not badminton. This is football.
Yeah, this is right? Football.
Let's call it what it is. And guys play injured and hurt. And there's kind of a difference between those two. But this is par for the course. This is what you do. And I can understand what Nate's saying. Well, let Jarrett Stidham go in. Let Zach Wilson go in. But I would tell Nate, as well I would tell you, there's no way Sean Payton was going to allow that to happen. Why? Because the Broncos as an organization has never developed a quarterback. They've never drafted a quarterback and developed him. And in Sean's history, he's never done it, right? So this is kind of a first test drive for both Sean and the Denver Broncos. And oh, by the way, as the numbers pile up for Bo, they not only look great for Bo, they look great for the organization, and they look great for Coach Payton. Yeah. So I can understand the hesitation of saying, well, no, we're not going to put those other two guys in. No. That's not what we're going to do. We're not trying to create any quarterback controversy here, right? We took a guy in the first round at 12. He's our guy, and we're not going to change that. What you're going to do, you're going to ask Bo, can you go out and play? Now, Bo will probably say during the week, I'm a little sore, but right now I can't play. Well, the next question is if game day was today, could you go out there and play? And what was the percentage that you would be able to go out there and play? So if Bo say he's at 70%, then they say, well, you know what? We're going to take it because Bo's 70% was better than 100% from Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham, right? So you're not going to get a change in quarterback, but it does say a lot about Bo, knowing as though he went out and he played well, even with that fracture in his back. But I don't want to say that you stop Bo from being Bo. You can't. No, you don't do that. Now you may say because you have that fracture, just be smart. You're the guy on the field. If you are going to take off and run, get the yards, get out of bounds, fall on the ground. But I tell you this, not having a quarterback that can, I guess, navigate the pocket, become a threat to run the ball and draw in the defense, to me, those days are gone. I mean, because the remaining dinosaurs, okay, the remaining dinosaurs of that particular prehistoric era is Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers. And we see what they look like right about now, don't we?
Yeah, we're going to see a good matchup of that with Stafford and Hurts. Like just two different kinds there playing in the NFC this weekend. So we'll get a good example. I also think that the play Bo got hurt on, I think he was in the pocket. So like you could get hurt anywhere out there on the field. So it doesn't matter run or not.
Remember, I think it was 2 years ago, might have been, if I'm not mistaken. The Baltimore Ravens playing against the Broncos. The Broncos are in Baltimore, right? And I think Justin Simmons had like 2 interceptions or something like that. But think about Lamar Jackson, right? Lamar got hurt not running outside the pocket. He got hurt in the pocket.
Yeah.
So if God has given you athleticism, the last thing you want to do, Phil, is stand there and let some 360-pound guy crush you. No, get the hell out of there and run.
Yeah, get out.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's safer to slide than take a hit in there.
Yes,
with
it is.
With those big dudes. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so looking at this team then overall, in order to take that next step, what are a couple of positions that they need to address this offseason?
I'll start with tight end, right? On my wish list is Tyler Warren out of Penn State. He's kind of that do everything type guy. He works well in space. I think he does. He can improve his blocking, but I just like the willingness and the physicality that he definitely presents. And when you think about Sean Payton and his history down in New Orleans, he had a guy by the name of Taysom Hill that he would sometime line up behind center. Guess who does that naturally? Tyler Warren, right? So that adds another element to your offense. If you're able to get a guy like that, even if they don't, they still need get a guy who's a pass catching tight end. Most would say, well, you need an inline blocking tight end. I played with Shannon Sharp. All you need to do is have a tight end that's willing to get in the way. Right? That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
Guys get in the way. But you need a guy that you can flex out and you can use as a rather large wide receiver. Now, could the Broncos make a phone call down to the Atlanta Falcons and say, well, hey, listen, what would you be willing to, what would we need to do to give you to part ways with Kyle Pitts, right? That's kind of another option. So the moral of the story, you need a true pass-catching tight end. But here's the caveat, Phil, wait for it. You got to throw him the damn ball.
Yeah.
And listen, I love what Nate Atkins has been able to do, but that is somewhat of a short yardage tight end / fullback that can pick up 4 yards or maybe a yard when you're close to the end zone. No, you need a guy who you can flex out, who can attack down the numbers inside of the hashes. The Broncos really don't have that guy. They need a Isaiah Likely or a Mark Andrews type guy.
Yeah, somebody who fits like that Jimmy Graham role down there in New Orleans, he was so lethal for Sean there. What about like a running back? I know that so many people are like obsessed with getting a guy who can be like sort of that bell cow. Even though Sean said that maybe that's not the route that they really want to go in.
Well, so if Sean is saying that's not the direction he wants to go, why is that the case? Because you got to go back and look at a coach's book and their past history. Going back in New Orleans, you had Darren Sproles, Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray, Deuce McAllister, Reggie Bush, all those types of backs. those were pass catching backs out of the backfield, right? Other than Deuce McAllister, who's a big guy, who, I mean, he's kind of a ground and pound type of guy. But even with his size, catching the ball out of the backfield. Because when you think about what Sean Payton is used to doing, throwing to those guys, screen passes like that, even though you're giving it to the running back, that's not a run play. That's a pass. So this is probably why he doesn't want that kind of ground and pound running back. But you're going to need that ground and pound kind of guy. Like I like Cam Scatterboo from ASU, right? Tough as hell. And I mean, his head is like a battering ram, right? you need a guy who can bring the physicality. Also, he's lined up under center too, right? Direct quarterback snaps. And also, he knows how to run routes. To me, having a back like that will definitely help Bo. But if the whole idea is that we want to go pass-centric, which has kind of been the motto of the NFL, to me, you don't want to do that. Because, Phil, go back to last Sunday and look at every single team, home or away, that won the game. They had a balanced attack, and their running backs rushed for at least 100 or nearly 100. You know, the Broncos hadn't had a 100-yard single rusher since 2021, and that was Latavius Murray.
Wow. That's a good fact. That's dropping some knowledge there. Yeah, I do think that you're seeing sort of a revolution around the league here with like Saquon, Derrick Henry, James Cook. These guys set the tone, and it just really it like carries through the whole team, like that physical way that they're going to win the game. I think you are seeing that begin to change, even in Detroit, like with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Like all of these teams have these running backs, and so I do think you're seeing sort of a change around the league. And then one other one for you: what about on defense? Do you think like an inside linebacker or maybe like a safety could help this defense change things around?
Well, they need help on all three levels. I would like to see them add more beef for the interior as far as stuff in the run. So you want to do that. Also, you can never have enough edge rushers. Now, Drew Sanders came back, and I don't know where they want to put him, inside or outside. I think he's athletic enough to play both, but can you handle that kind of workload? So that's kind of tough. But you need linebackers who are physical, who play with their hands, and who can cover, because think about what the game is, right? Teams are still running the ball. Baltimore is not going anywhere. Kansas City's not going anywhere. Cincinnati's not going anywhere. So you have to be able to drop back in coverage, recognize what teams are doing to you, but you also have to have a physical presence. Now, moving back to the area of the field that I am quite familiar with, and that's the safety position, right? I thought Brandon Jones did an excellent job of this season, especially after losing Justin Simmons. He made a lot of game-changing plays. You go back to the Tampa game where he made a couple of plays that kind of set the offense up. But then you say, okay, well, who's the other guy outside of him? I thought that P.J. Locke was going to be able to step into that role. That didn't really happen the way most people or myself thought. And then you're wondering, okay, well, you got J.L. Skinner on the roster. I mean, when is he going to take that next step? What's the reason why he hasn't really stepped up to compete against P.J. Locke? So for me, the Broncos definitely need to go out and either draft a young guy or get a veteran guy. I'm still waving the banner and hoping that maybe the Broncos, having a change of heart, possibly look at Justin Simmons, allow him to finish his career here. Just think about that. You get him on a team-friendly 2-year deal. You partner him with Brandon Jones. You got two smart guys in the secondary. Both guys are used to making plays. Think about how much that would change the Broncos defense. But I don't know who's going to be the defensive coordinator, because if Vance gets a job, will it be Jim Leonard? Will it be someone else? I mean, my whole idea is that you got to be good in the back end. You got to have guys who are physical, who work in concert with one another, but you need playmakers in that secondary, and I say at all three levels of the defense.
Yeah, that would be a nice story if Justin came back. I think that would be good. Because I thought that PJ he took some bad angles last Sunday, and
Mhm.
yeah, it didn't really seem to ever really materialize this
Oh,
year.
one more thing, Phil, because
Okay.
it's like there's a grocery list of things that the Broncos need.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention wide receiver. Right?
Yep.
You're going to need wide receiver help. Troy Franklin started to come on, but you could tell he was still trying to kind of understand with the offense. He should be better in year two. Marvin Mims needs to go down the field more vertically. We don't know what's going to happen with Cortland Sutton. I would love to see Sutton back, but he needs another wide receiver opposite him to really help him out. Like for me, if you had Sutton, you had Mims, and you had another scary type of wide receiver, now you really open up the field for Bo Nix.
Yeah, I thought Devon Vele like was pretty solid there, but you're right. They don't have like one guy who is like keeping defensive coordinators up at night, you know? So like
Yes.
if they were able to add like a player like that who is like a legitimate like a T Higgins, I know he's going to be like the big name this offseason, but we'll have
Sign
to
me
see.
up for it.
Yeah, yeah,
Sign me
exactly.
up for it.
Okay, Nick, last one for you. I'm going to let you out of here on this. I saw Jake Plummer. He did like a little Instagram video the other day, and he brought up something interesting that I was like, oh, that's sort of interesting. He talked about how your guys' Broncos teams lost a couple of blowout games to the Colts in the wild card round before turning it around that 2005 season. I'm wondering what changed for you guys from a bad wild card loss to all of a sudden it all came together and you were, in position to make a run at a Super Bowl. And do you think that something similar there could be in the works for the Broncos this year?
Well, for us, we got tired of losing damn games, right? At some point, you have to take a look in the mirror and say, look, do we like the face that we are seeing staring back at us? And no, we didn't, because we knew we were a very talented team, but we were not playing our best brand of football in those key moments. And granted, in some of those games against the Colts, we had certain people banged up. I mean, I know one year, there was Al Wilson had a cast on his hand. John had an injury. Champ had an injury. Then we ended up playing them again. I broke my radius bone, so I didn't play in that game. And once again, this is where depth comes in. Those guys who are in waiting, when the starter goes out, you have to be willing to step up and play. So this is where the Broncos find themselves. They got a taste of what the playoffs look like, right? See, they went from ramen noodles to filet mignon, right? They got a taste. So here's what the chef did. He going into Buffalo, they cut him a section of the filet mignon and say, taste that. You taste that tender meat. That's what success tastes like. But if you want more of it, what are you willing to put in? And that means every single guy in the locker room has to be willing to make personal sacrifices. Whatever that is, you have to be willing to make a personal sacrifice. And when we play in that FC Championship game, that's what we had to do. From man to man, make personal sacrifice, make sure you're not the guy. That was the biggest thing. And I tell you, I learned that from being around Bill Parcells and Mike Westhoff. When they turn on the film, you want to make sure you are not that guy, right? And this is what the Broncos have to do. Soul searching. Did I play my best ball in Buffalo? And if I didn't, why did I not? And understanding, if you did not play your best ball, they're bringing someone in to replace you.
Yep. That's how the NFL works. And,
That's
and,
what it
and
is.
that's why I think it was so big to make the playoffs. Like, hey, they got blown out, but they got that taste, and now they want to get back. So,
Yeah,
I,
they got the taste of that little filet mignon, but you want the whole thing, Phil.
yeah, they
You
don't
want
want
the
to go
whole
back to
thing.
McDonald's.
No, no, you don't want to go back to chicken McNuggets after tasting filet mignon. No, you don't
Yeah.
want that.
All right, Nick. Hey, I really appreciate your time. Love the insight there, man. And yeah, we'll see what happens here in the off season. It's heading in the right direction, but it is a big off season, so we'll see what happens.
Well, let's see what George Payton and Sean Payton does with that grocery list. And I know they don't want the petite steak. They want the cowboy steak. So I'm very optimistic as far as where this team can get to, but it's going to take some hard work to get there. But I applaud them and celebrate them for what they've been able to do this season. But to get back to the standard, got to do more.
All right, Nick, appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil.
My thanks to Nick Ferguson for taking some time to drop that wisdom there. Love that analogy about, hey, you got a taste of some filet here. You want to keep eating that filet. You don't want to go back to, like he said, ramen noodles. I thought that was perfect. And, I do think that the Broncos, I think there's a lot to build off from this season, but it's going to be a big offseason here. Yes, they've got $52 million in cap space now that's opened up, but what do you do with that? And that's going to be really important for this team to take the next step because, I saw an interesting tweet this week that said, look, the better quarterback won every game in the wild card round. And so you look around and you say, yeah, that was probably true. That's not always the case. If you've got a better team, you can win a matchup if you don't have like amazing quarterback play. But if you've got pretty good quarterback play and the rest of the team is really strong, you can win. You can win the Super Bowl that way. But last weekend in particular, the better quarterback won in all of those matchups. And it just got me thinking that, there are really good quarterbacks, especially in the AFC, that are going to make things tough, moving forward for the Broncos. And you hope that they make the right additions this offseason, that they can get back to this position and then take that next step. I do have a lot of confidence in George Payton. I've got a lot of confidence in Sean Payton, the way that they're building this team. Now that they've got consistency there at the coaching position, they know what they want. And that makes a big deal going into the offseason. And they've made a lot of really strong moves so far. So I expect it to continue. But I just thought, man, it is hard to make the playoffs, especially in the AFC. And, you just hope that the Broncos can get back to this spot. And I agree. I think that a tight end has to be number one on the list. I think that the running back position, it's going to be interesting what they do there. I don't think that just finding a guy and plugging him in and saying, okay, now that's going to correct all the problems. There's got to be a commitment to running the football and playing football that way. There's got to be a commitment, I think, from Bo to work on being under center a little bit more and able in order for them to be able to play that smash mouth football that they say they want to play. So I do think that they could add a running back just to give them somebody who's dynamic at that spot. That certainly will help things. But there's more to the running back, the running game woes than just, hey, Javonte didn't have it or blaming it on one of those guys. I think they've got some talent there, but they've got to be able to commit to that. And then to me, inside linebacker is going to be a big question mark, and safety. I do think that they're going to have to shore up some things on the back end there. So that's my thoughts on where the Broncos stand. I was upset by that Bills game. I would have loved to see that be, like, for example, I would feel way better for some reason right now if they would have made that such a close game that you were like, they're really close. Like, they could go to Buffalo and almost beat. The way that they lost that game, I was like, it was a great season, but they're still far away from the Bills, the Ravens, in my opinion, the Chiefs. I think, yes, they almost beat the Chiefs in the regular season, but there's such a difference with that Chiefs team. Like, I think that sometimes things just happen so easily for them that it's possible to knock them off in the regular season. But when they're sharp and they're really focused in the playoffs, I think you're going to see that Chiefs team hit another gear here coming up this week. And you're going to be reminded hey, yeah, they're still the Chiefs. You know what I mean? And even then, there's such apathy toward them, winning all the time that you're just sort of yeah, they're fine. No, they're the number one seed. They won 15 games this year. Could have probably won 16 games if they were pushing it with the starters. I mean, who knows what would have happened in that last game, but they took that game off. Okay. That's what I guess what I'm trying to say. And they still won 15 games and they're the number one seed. So they're still the Chiefs. And so the way the Broncos played in that game makes me feel Okay, there's still some distance here. That's all I'm going to say. And I think that if Bo takes another jump and really is dedicated this offseason and makes that jump, and Sean opens up things even more for him, and they add some right pieces, then you can see them take that jump. But it's going to be a big offseason. And I guess that's what's exciting about the offseason is, especially this year, you're not starting from zero. You're starting from you're so much further in the process now that they could, if they do the right things, like they said, their goal is to win the division. You could see them taking that step, but it's gonna take a lot from this offseason. And so you're not starting from zero and building up. Now you're in the middle of the way. Can you take that next jump? And I guess that's a really good spot to be in at this point. And I think that you should be really excited. And I loved how they said, "Hey, we're coming for the Chiefs here." Like Sean Payton said, "Hey, we would have felt good about playing the Chiefs." Greg Penner said, "Our goal is to win the division." You should, if you're the Broncos, set your sights on the top there and say, "That's what we're aiming at. Let's go out and make that clear." I love that they did that, and so that was great to me. I wanted to give my predictions here. You let me know what you think's going to happen in this wild card round. I got the Lions and I got the Rams. I think Sean McVay is really coaching at the highest level right now, and I think that I could see them going on the road. And I'm interested to see what Vic Fangio has in store for the Rams. They lost Nakobe Dean there, so I'm interested to see what happens. But I do see the Rams going on the road and setting up an NFC Championship of Rams Lions. Like, how sweet would that be? And then in the AFC, I got the Chiefs, and then I see that Bills Ravens game as being like an all time classic. And I do think that the Bills being at home, for some reason, I think that they're going to knock off the Ravens, but I think that that's going to be a classic. And I think Chiefs Bills setting up another matchup there between Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. So that's what I see happening this weekend. You let me know what you think. Okay, for the bourbon review, I thought that this week what I do is review the season of bourbons that we reviewed, and I'll give you my top 3 here. So really enjoyed getting into all these bourbons this year. What I did during the regular season here is that I tried to pick bourbons that are readily available and at a pretty entry-level price point here, okay? So that's what I tried to do in case you're trying to look back and be like, what bourbons did I look at? That's what I was trying to do. As we head into the off season, I think that the podcast, it might not be every week. It might be like 2 times a month. I think that we'll try to come up with an episode. Try to get some really good guests here. Maybe I'll start trying to get maybe some national media people to come on, and then maybe some more Broncos players that we didn't, former Broncos players that we didn't get a chance to chat with. We'll try and bring them onto the show. And I think with that, maybe I'll try to find some more particular bourbons that are like really great value at that price point, or maybe a little bit harder to find, like just to try and mix it up a little bit here. So I think that that's what we'll try to do heading into the off season. But my top 3 bourbons that I reviewed this year, I think number 1, I'll go with Elijah Craig Small Batch. That's just like my favorite bourbon. If you watch that episode, that's the one that I'm always reaching for and I'm inclined to get at this level. That's just sort of like my go-to. That's my weekday. I just get home from work. I want something to just sort of relax it while I make dinner or something. That's the bottle I go to. So Elijah Craig, number 1. Number 2, Four Roses Single Barrel. That's the first bourbon I reviewed this year. And it makes you think about it. Hey, like that was so good, and so like, even though all these months later, I'm still thinking about that Four Roses Single Barrel. The small batch is great too. So if you're interested in trying that, go out for the small batch too. And then I would say like that Woodford Reserve is still, that's still like such a solid bottle to me. So that would be my number 3 there. So Elijah Craig, Four Roses, and Woodford Reserve were my top 3, I think, that I tried this year. I did try that St. Remy XO cognac. I really enjoyed that one, and that made me thinking about that. Maybe I'll try a couple more cognacs too as we get into the off season. And I also enjoyed that Amaro Montenegro that I tried before Thanksgiving. So maybe I'll branch out a little bit too as we head into the off season and try some other things too. So appreciate the suggestions. I'll also be looking at that and trying to go out and get some of the bottles that you guys have suggested, and I really appreciate those. So the podcast will be throughout the off season, but just maybe a little bit less frequent. So we'll see. If there's something that happens that warrants a podcast, I'm going to be here. And maybe we can do some live ones too. I think, maybe that could be fun too, just to mix it up. Let me know what you think. Would you be interested in a live one? Maybe if like beforehand, I was like, hey, we're going to be sipping on this bourbon and we'll have a live show. That way, maybe you guys can try it if you want to, and we can just have a little more interaction that way. I think maybe that could be fun. So, as always, please like and subscribe to the show. Again, I appreciate Nick coming on here today and breaking down the season and also that Bills game a little bit, and also looking forward to an exciting off season. So that's going to do it for us. We'll be back here in a week or two. Until then, for Broncos and Bourbon, I'm Phil Milani.